Welcome to Slacker Sports Show.
Good evening, sports fans, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Slacker Sports Show, where we discuss anything and everything you need to know about sports. Let's welcome in the co-host of the podcast, Mark. How you doing, Mark?
Doing well. NBA Finals are here. Major League Baseball playoffs are starting up. I mean, it's getting busy here in sports, and glad to have a lot of stuff going on right now, so we got plenty to talk about.
Yeah, so mostly what we're going to talk about today is the NBA, the MLB, the playoffs started there, and then kind of what's going on in the NFL. We're kind of not talking about the NCAA football, mostly just because not a lot of crazy things are going on there yet, and there's just so much to cover in the NBA with the championship coming up, the MLB playoffs just starting, and some stuff going on in the NFL. So let's get it started with the NBA playoffs. If you have not heard, we have our two teams in the playoffs. One I'm surprised about, one not so much. The Heat and the Lakers in the finals. The game starts tonight. As soon as this podcast comes out, we will have a winner of game one. But Mark, what do you think about this? Did you think the Heat, we talked about it last week, even though the podcast didn't go up, but did you think the Heat were the more dominant team than Boston, or how do you feel about this series exactly?
I mean, you kind of hit it on the head when you were kind of talking about it, that I think everybody expected the Lakers to be here or the Clippers, who kind of just didn't show up, but Lakers is no surprise. But the Heat, I mean, I knew they were a good team coming in. I think when we did our preview podcast of the playoffs, I said, yeah, they could probably take a round here and maybe upset somebody, but I didn't expect them to get this far, and I'm fully on the Heat bandwagon now. I really like their team and how they play, just their group of guys, and I've been really impressed, and just kind of seeing them in the limited amount of games I've watched of them playing, their style of play really seems to upset a lot of the normal rhythm in which teams play. I think that's kind of why they're here. They just play really hard, really fast. Emphasis on defense probably more than offense, which is unique in today's NBA. And I'm just really impressed with them as a team. And kind of what's come to mind for me when comparing these two teams is you got a well-rounded team in the Heat where you could probably expect points from guys 1 through 8 or 1 through 10. Wouldn't be surprised if any of those guys came out and had a huge scoring night. They're just good from top to bottom. Versus the Lakers, where you got basically your two guys up top and then some solid role players, but they're not at the same level as those guys. So you got a well-rounded team versus basically two stars. And it kind of reminds me of another series the Lakers were in once upon a time back in 2004 when they played the Pistons. If you listeners remember that, that's I think one of Shaq and Kobe's last years together. Everybody expected them to win the finals to beat this Pistons team, but the Pistons had, kind of like the Heat, a really solid defensive team. All their starters were pretty even as far as skill level and just had a solid team from top to bottom. So we're kind of seeing this happen to the Lakers again just like 16 years later. So that's kind of an interesting parallel. But I guess I don't know who I'm picking yet. I might have to think a little bit more about it. Like I said, the Lakers are top heavy with their two stars. They definitely have the best two players in this series, but Miami's been playing tough this whole playoffs, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them take a couple games that surprise some people.
Yeah, so kind of what you said about the Pistons, if I remember right, that team was just basically known for their defense. And yeah, kind of like what you said, they just weren't expected to do. I mean, I wouldn't say they weren't expected to win. They won their league and everything. I just didn't know how good they were until the playoffs, and then kind of things just happened in the playoffs. And I think that was the year they had, I'm trying to think, they probably had like Chauncey Billups. I think that was a year with Ben Wallace and Rasheed Wallace. And so, yeah.
Rip Hamilton and kind of just some other glue guys that bounced around the league, but kind of like the Heat, where it's maybe some undervalued guys that are finally finding their place in the league and just have a good surrounding group around them.
Yeah, and they didn't have like that one star. They kind of had people just show up every game and no matter really who it was, they got the job done. And so I could see the Heat. I honestly, I don't know. I can't see the Heat really winning this. I mean, it could happen. Anything can happen. They made it here. But I don't know. I think the Lakers just are too good. I wouldn't be surprised if it went to a Game 5 or Game 6. I don't think the Lakers will sweep them. I think Miami will win at least 1 or 2, but I just don't see it going to Game 7 and the Heat being able to pull it out. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't know. I think the Lakers are just too good, and they're going to come in a little more fresh than Miami was, because the Miami series with Boston went to Game 6 where Miami won it. And so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they have enough days off. What was that game on Sunday? And it'll be Wednesday before they play. So they've had days off. But the Lakers, I mean, they've been off since, Saturday, I believe, is when they were off. So I guess they got one more extra day than Miami. But I think the series, the finals, is going to be fun. I don't think it's what really anybody expected. I don't think anybody really expected Miami to make it here. What were they, like the 5 seed, I think, is what they were? And so for a 5 seed to make it in and make it all the way to the NBA Finals, it's something a little new. I feel like we kind of knew the teams that were going to make it there the last couple of years in the NBA, and this year is kind of shaking everything up. So it'll be a fun series. We'll wait to see how it all plays out. Right now, if we're recording the 30th, Game 1 is tonight. Game 2 is on the 2nd, which is a Friday. Game 3 is on Sunday. And then Game 4 will be Tuesday. So we could possibly, next week, by the time this podcast comes out, we could see an NBA winner if they sweep it in 4. But I'm doubting that will happen. So hopefully next week we'll have an update for you on the finals as well. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the MLB playoffs. They've started. They're doing a little things different this year. They got 16 teams in. Each has 8 league teams. So it's a little different than normal. Usually you have the play-in games, kind of the wild card games. And so far, it's looking pretty crazy right now. We got Houston in already. They swept the Twins 2-0. And the first series is best of 3, and all games will be at the home seed. So a lot of high-powered teams looking to make it through, but it is weird because it is best of 3. Usually in the wild card series, it's 1 game, but after that, it's usually best of 5 and best of 7. Rarely is it best of 3. So it's a little weird because some big teams could get knocked off in this first round just because they played bad for 1 or 2 games.
Yeah, and I just kind of looking at this new formula, I guess you could call it, or this new setup for the playoffs. I mean, I don't mind, I think, some of the tweaks they're trying. I mean, I know it'll be just for this year, probably with coronavirus and everything, but I think the greater number of teams you get in, the better as far as drawing fans to the playoffs. I mean, you're getting more eyes and more cities to watch the playoffs and kind of maybe be more invested, and even in games that they're not playing in, just pay attention to your product. And like you said, wild card round is at the home of the higher seed. Divisional round and anything beyond that is at neutral sites, which is different, but we kind of understand why because of coronavirus. And the AL and NL Championship Series. The AL is in San Diego. The NL will be in Arlington, Texas. And then I believe the World Series, I don't think I put that on our script here, but I think the World Series is in Arlington as well, in the Rangers ballpark there. So it'll definitely be weird as far as I think you really see the effect of the fans shine in the postseason in baseball a lot more than maybe the regular season. And it'll be really weird to just see the most important game of the year, and I guess this would apply to basketball too, but see the most important game of the year with no fans. That's going to be another one of those weird things in this COVID year that stands out, but definitely be interesting. Could have some upsets. I mean, just as somebody who didn't really pay attention to baseball a ton this year, I was surprised at some of the teams when I checked the standings, and I'll probably have Trevor talk about that a little bit more. But I was surprised at some of the teams that made it in. What surprises you about the 8 teams on each side that made it in?
It was weird because usually at the end of the season, the last 3 days are usually not going to change the standings or the outcome of the playoffs. But this year, in the last game, the last day of the year, the last final day of the year, we had 4 or 5 teams playing to try to make it into the playoffs. And so it's a little different because with so fewer games than normal, there wasn't that big spread out. Also, with them making it a bigger playoff, you saw more teams make it in. So you saw teams like Toronto that, they didn't have a great record and they still made it in. You got teams like Cincinnati, Milwaukee that made it in on the last day and were basically kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. But like Toronto, who's the 8th seed in the AL, they finished at 32-28. So they finished 4 games up on 500, which is very rare to see a team finish that low and still be able to make it in. And so it's different, but I feel like I tweeted about it earlier, and I feel like it's very on point, and that's that playoff baseball is completely different. The playoff atmosphere, I know there isn't fans, so that kind of puts a damper on it. But if you've never seen playoff baseball, it is completely different than the regular season. You got just the atmosphere of it all, stuff like that. And to bring up another point about this year in the NL, the AC Milwaukee finished 29-31, so they actually finished below 500, and I'm pretty sure that's never been done before, a team finishing below 500 and still making it in. But I feel like this is a very, and so far in the matchups we've seen, they've been very, very close. We had 2-seed Atlanta and 7th seed Cincinnati go into the 13th inning, where Atlanta won 1-0. So, the pitcher duel between Bauer and Fried was crazy. They just went at each other for 13 innings. And so Houston, as I said, moved on. So that's a 6 seed beating a 3 seed, even though I felt like Minnesota was coming in kind of down already. So I wasn't really surprised by that. So far, we got Miami, the 6 seed, beating Chicago, the 3 seed, 5-1. Again, that's just game 1, so the series being led by Miami there. And then Oakland and the Chicago White Sox kind of thought that would go through. I actually thought White Sox might be able to upset Oakland, but again, this is only a series of 3 games. So, a team like Miami, that probably isn't the better team, but if they could sneak two away from Chicago, that completely changes the playoffs. And so I think it's going to be fun to watch. I'm actually really excited to watch this. Usually I'm only excited when the teams that I want to see in are in, but I think we're going to see a lot of different teams kind of do well in the playoffs this year. The Yankees, they struggle with injuries, and yet they still made it in the playoffs, and then they manhandled Cleveland last night, I think by 10 runs or something. So I don't know. It's going to be exciting. I usually wouldn't say a 1 seed is in danger until they get to the NL and AL championship game. But honestly, I could see a 7 beating a 2 and a 1 beating an 8. I don't see Milwaukee beating the Dodgers, but I could see Toronto beating Tampa Bay. I believe Tampa Bay is up right now by a lot. But yeah, I could see a lot of upsets, and I could see this playoff picture really changing quickly, which in other years I feel like wouldn't really be a thing.
Yeah, and I guess like I said, somebody who maybe hasn't paid attention as much as I should have this year to baseball, some of the teams that are kind of surprised me where they're at in these standings, and you could probably lead more to this conversation about why they're there. Yankees, I guess I'm not surprised because I did hear about all the injuries they suffered this year. Houston, I'm surprised just because everybody was so down on them this year, and they did have kind of I think it was a sub 500 record. White Sox, I guess I'm not super surprised because people have been kind of on that bandwagon for a couple years now of that they got all these young guys, they're up and coming, and Like we kind of said, I think at our season preview podcast of Major League Baseball, even if these teams don't make it super far, this will be good experience for some of those young guys on teams like this where you got a bunch of prospects coming up. In the NL, maybe not as surprising. Miami definitely is surprising. I knew they kind of started out hot, but I'm surprised they kept it going. You were on the Cincinnati train pretty early in the year, so maybe that's not as surprising to you. And let's see, San Diego, I guess just hearing all the noise they made during the middle of the season, I'm surprised they're not a couple seeds higher, but I guess there's probably some ebbs and flows there. So as a casual baseball fan, just kind of checking in here and there, some things that surprise me, but I think you'll see a lot of the more talented teams kind of come to the forefront, which seems like they are early on.
So to kind of put it into kind of how they did the seeding, so the kind of like what you explained, San Diego, they're a 4 seed, and they had 37 wins, and Chicago Cubs, which are the 3 seed, they ended up with 34. So you kind of wonder, well, why don't they have the upper seed? I believe the top 3 or 4 seeds, top 3 seeds, the top 3 seeds go to whoever won the division. So no matter how much they won or lost, whoever won that division got the higher seed. So that's why like Chicago and Atlanta have a higher seed than San Diego does, because they won their leagues even though they actually won fewer games in San Diego. But I honestly don't know. It really does suck for like San Diego, because one, they're in the Dodgers league, which the Dodgers just are murdering everyone. They have a run differential of 136 runs, but then you look right below them, and San Diego has outscored their opponents by 84, and that's the second most in the league. So it really has penalized them, and now they're going against a St. Louis team that earlier when I was watching it, St. Louis I think was up 4-0 in the first inning. So kind of just proving that, this is only 3 games in the series. I mean, you can't lose too. So it'll be interesting to see kind of if some big teams get knocked off early, and then kind of the teams like the Dodgers show why they've been great all season and they continue. As far as teams that made it in, Miami I was surprised about, just because, I mean, last year they were pretty bad last year, and they honestly weren't great this year. They just figured out how to win games and figured out how to stay in the mix of it all. As far as the Yankees making it in, I was actually kind of happy they made it in, mostly because I thought that their team was really, really good. I figured it was going to be the Yankees and the Dodgers in the World Series, and then the Yankees got just absolutely demolished by injuries. I'm pretty sure every single person on their team got injured at least once. And Cleveland, I was surprised they kind of made it in. They kind of made a strong push in the middle of the season. Minnesota, I thought was going to be the best out of the AL Central, and they ended up being the top seed out of the AL Central. But the White Sox and Cleveland were 1 game behind them, so kind of surprised that Cleveland did as good. White Sox, kind of on the fence. They've struggled as of late. They've lost in the last 10 games. They went 2-8. They were playing very, very good and very, very strong, and then it's like the last week they really fell off. And so I don't know what to think about them going into the playoffs. I really thought a week ago that the White Sox would be kind of the only team to come out of the AL that could beat Tampa Bay. But now that they've really struggled, and they're going against Oakland, who Oakland's been good pretty much all year. So I don't know. A lot changed in the last week of the season, which normally in the baseball season of 162 games, mostly the last week of the season doesn't really change the playoff picture or anything like that. But it really, really has in this one, because the White Sox were in first place, and they go from being the 3 seed to being the 7th seed in just a week. So a lot of crazy things going on, and yeah, I think this can go any way. I'm not really super surprised by any of the teams as far as the whole season goes. I actually thought Baltimore was going to make it in. They ended up missing it. The Angels, I guess I was kind of surprised that they didn't make it in. They're playing, I mean, they just played awful all year. The Nationals from last year winning the World Series, they had the worst record in their league. Other than that, I guess the Rockies, I thought the Rockies would be better. And they kind of had games where they played well, but their pitching was just awful. They gave up like 353 runs against, which is the most by like 40-some runs. So, yeah, their pitching just obliterated them. And so, I don't know. I mean, it's fun to watch. If you don't watch playoff baseball and you don't have a team in it, that's fine. I would just suggest watching maybe the AL or the NL Wildcard or the championship games, and they're just a lot of fun. And players seem to play just way beyond in the playoffs, which is, I think, what makes it most exciting.
We'll go ahead and move on to the NFL. One thing that's come about in the news recently, some news kind of breaking today about it, is the effect of coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, on the NFL. I think this is the first game that's been postponed in the season so far that I can remember. The Titans and Steelers game that was scheduled for Sunday, I believe, has been postponed. Several players and team personnel on the Titans tested positive for coronavirus, so they're postponing their game to either Monday or Tuesday. I guess I'm just kind of surprised by the fact that it's only postponed today, but we'll see how that works out. And then the Vikings, who the Titans played last week, haven't had any positive tests yet. I think they're doing quite a bit of testing, like daily, to check in. They haven't had any positive tests yet, but they kept their practice facility closed and have just been doing team meetings over Zoom. And they're scheduled to open back up on Thursday for their practice facility, but their game hasn't moved, so they got to cram basically almost a week of practice into about 2 or 3 days here. So kind of the first effect of COVID-19 on the NFL. Did the news surprise you? Did you think this was kind of coming to some team? Did the fact that it's the Titans surprise you? Kind of what did you think when you heard this news?
Well, I haven't heard exactly kind of. So when in baseball, when the Cardinals came down with it, we knew that it was because they went to a casino. I haven't heard yet what exactly started this, or if it was just a player's family has it, or kind of where it started, or stuff like that, or even when they, I guess, got it. Because now if none of the Vikings have it, well, did the Titans player get it after the game? So, like, the Vikings are in the clear, but it stinks because now the Vikings kind of lose out on all this practice time, and they still have their game on Sunday. But NFL's a little different to me than baseball, how they handle scheduling, because football, it's on a weekly rotation. Baseball is every day. So what MLB did is if you missed a game or missed a week, you could play double headers and make up for those games. NFL, you can't play like on a Sunday and then flip around, play on a Wednesday, and then flip around and play on another Sunday. Like, you can't really do that to make up the games. So I feel like eventually this would happen because the players aren't in a bubble. The players can still move around, go to home, go to the store, all this stuff. So I knew it would eventually happen. Honestly, I thought it would be a little bit bigger than just 6 people. I think is what I saw was 6 players and personnel. I thought it would actually be kind of bigger, like, 30-some players would get it on one team. And it's like, well, and I'm not saying that to take it lightly, but I don't know how they can shut it down for only like one extra day. Like, I don't see this game being played. I don't know if there's a bye week or something that they agree on that maybe they move games around. I don't know how they're going to play this out, but I really doubt that they're going to be postponed to just Monday or Tuesday. I don't know the protocols. I don't know exactly why they only pushed it back one day. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I'm not really surprised I'm actually surprised mostly that it took till after week 4, or we are in week 4. It's actually surprising to me that we played 3 whole weeks without any tests whatsoever, being positive. So I think that's the biggest thing that I'm surprised about. I knew eventually someone would get it and teams would start getting it. And if teams played other teams, and then we got a couple teams that have it, and then schedules get messed up and all that. But I think we'll just have to wait and see if they actually end up postponing it until Monday or Tuesday and playing the game, or if it gets pushed back even farther, or if some of the Vikings players come down with it, then boom, that game's going to get postponed. I think we'll have to just wait and see kind of as the week goes along what actually happens this weekend.
And speaking of kind of last week, I'm going to provide you with a few takeaways here from week 3. But one thing we hit on a lot last week was the Chiefs game versus Baltimore. That was a big showdown this week on Monday night, I believe. And I think we both maybe expected Kansas City to lose or just at least have a pretty tough fight with Baltimore, but Chiefs went out and took care of the Ravens. I mean, I was surprised at the score and just kind of the way they handled them, the way the defense has been playing. So I was surprised by the way they kind of stayed in the game, then were able to put away Baltimore. What did you think of that game?
Well, starting out, Baltimore came in with the best defense, so to speak, in the league. And I said it last week, but again, podcast went up. Baltimore really hadn't played anybody great yet. I think they played Cleveland. I'll have to look at who they played. But I knew they didn't play anybody that was like the caliber of Kansas City. And I feel like that kind of showed a little bit. I felt like, not that Baltimore is... I think Baltimore is as good as the Chiefs. I think they're very, very equal as far as as a team. But Baltimore beat the Browns, and then they beat the Texans, who the Chiefs also beat. And so I didn't think that the Ravens have actually been tested yet this year. And the Chiefs literally came out and just kind of I wouldn't say they beat the crap out of them, but the Chiefs could have put up a lot more points than they actually did. They missed a field goal at the end of halftime, which there was 6 or 8 seconds left, and they decided just to kick the field goal instead of trying to throw one at the end zone, see if they could come down with it before kicking the field goal. So they missed that field goal. They missed an extra point early on. And then at the end of the game, they kind of just ran the ball and did all this stuff. And, yeah, they could have probably put up at least another touchdown. And if they would have done that, we would have been looking at 41-20 game, which is a complete blowout in the NFL. And so, I don't know. The Ravens looked like, honestly, it kind of shocked me that the Ravens offense was so good coming into this game, and they couldn't do anything against the Chiefs defense. I feel like they were just straight up lost. They had no idea how to attack this defense. And I don't know if it's because the defense showed up and played well. I mean, we know the Chiefs defense, when they play well, they play well. But then there's some games where it's their defense isn't as good as, I don't know, they're on and off. And so for me, for the Chiefs defense to come up and play that good in a big game is a good thing to see as a Chiefs fan. But I would really be worried as a Ravens fan, what happened? Why was our offense completely shut down by this defense, and how do we fix it? Because coming into this game, I thought it was going to be like what you said last week, the Rams and Kansas City game where it's 48-40. I thought it was going to be a game like that, but the Ravens offense just looked awful. I don't even think Lamar Jackson threw for over 100 yards, and he only ran for 80 some yards or something, which is completely off of what he normally does. So I would say the big takeaway from this is that as a Chiefs fan, you're feeling good that your defense can show up in big games. Hopefully they can keep doing that. Some more injuries happened, and we'll have to address that and see what we can do. But I feel like the big takeaway is that the Chiefs defense came and showed up. Patrick Mahomes is going to do his thing. Every week he does something weird and it works. And then as a Baltimore Raven, I would just really be worried, not about their defense. I mean, they went up against Patrick Mahomes. What all can you do? But the offense was just nothing. There was just nothing there. And that's what would scare me the most, being a Ravens fan.
Well, and one thing I heard a lot of national analysts point at this week is that Kansas City is kind of the Baltimore's kryptonite. Like, they can play great against everybody else, but once they get to the Chiefs, they haven't been able to get over the hump this past couple of years. So it may be one of those things where they have to face them a couple of years in a row in the playoffs to really get a handle on them and maybe eventually beat the Chiefs, but just kind of had trouble figuring them out so far. So something to be concerned about, like you said, as a Baltimore fan, if we got any Baltimore fans out there listening. Another showdown versus a couple big contenders that may surprise some people as far as how it turned out was the Buffalo Bills faced off against the Los Angeles Rams this week. The Bills won. They got a big win over the Rams, so that's kind of two upper echelon NFC teams facing off here. And I mean, I was kind of on the Buffalo train this offseason. I guess I'm not as surprised as some people, but I think this is their first showdown against a team of this caliber. So it's kind of like the Chiefs win over Baltimore, where it's their first kind of prove it game or kind of a proving ground there. So it's probably a big win for the Buffalo Bills and another stage for Josh Allen to perform on as far as a fantasy impact. So. But we'll hit on that a little bit later. Do you have any thoughts about the Bills and the Rams?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Rams kind of had it figured out last week. They had a pretty good week, and I thought they kind of turned the corner. And then all of a sudden they do this, and it's like, well, maybe they're not as good as, you know what I mean? So I think I think they will be a team that goes up and down. I don't think that they will kind of go back to that Rams team a couple years ago when they were pretty much unstoppable, and they're 2-1. I mean, they're not. I mean, they beat the Eagles, they beat the Cowboys, but the Bills to me was the biggest one, and I'm just not fully into the Bills yet. I know they're playing well. I know they're winning. I get it. They're 3-0. I mean, they're not bad. I don't know. I'm waiting for the rails to fall off the train. You know, I'm like, it's like kind of when a team starts out like 4-0, but it's like, well, I mean, are they really that good? I mean, they're not that good, are they? And then next thing you know, they're down to like a 5-10 record. So I'm kind of just waiting for the wheels to fall off. But so far, so good for Buffalo. They've got some pretty easy opponents in the AFC East with Miami and New York, so they should pretty much handle those teams. They played Miami and beat them, and then they played the Jets and beat them. But I do think beating the Rams was a big thing for them. And then next week they got a game at the Raiders, which I think they could probably win, start out 4-0. But then they go at Tennessee Titans and then against Kansas City Chiefs. And I think those two games against the Titans and the Chiefs will kind of really reflect if this Buffalo team is as good as they're playing right now. And I think they might make the playoffs. I think they could make the playoffs. I think they could beat New England out. But I don't know how long it's going to last before kind of the wheels fall off.
I'll hit a couple more of my takeaways here and then maybe hand off to Trevor to see if he noticed anything else this week. Falcons once again gave up a big lead. I think they were up by double digits. I think it was about 20 points over Chicago, and then the Bears came back. I think they finally ended the Mitchell Trubisky experience and put in Nick Foles and came back. And the Bears are 3-0. Again, that might be one of those teams that's starting out hot, but not maybe as good as their undefeated record would say. But if you're a Falcons fan, you got to be concerned that your team's getting you're not concerned that your team's getting points, but you're concerned that your defense is giving up a ton of points in a short amount of time. And Dan Quinn, their coach, is supposed to be this defensive genius. That's what they said when he came in, and that's kind of coming over. I think he's at Seattle before as their defensive coordinator. They touted him as a defensive genius, and definitely not showing that right now. So Falcons, I think, are 0-3 now, and couple big games in a row where they gave up a big lead. They did that same thing to Dallas last week, and the Bears, like I said, 3-0, but maybe not as good as that record shows. But one team that is kind of starting to stand out as a legitimate contender, I think, this year is Seattle. I know their defense is struggling and may not be that Legion of Boom defense anymore, but Russell Wilson is going off in a lot of the games he's playing. I mean, they're kind of finally letting Russell cook. I think it's got the hashtag that a lot of Seahawks fans use, but he's finally being released to, I guess, pass early on and try to make big plays. And they're 3-0 now. They just beat Dallas, who has been on and off this first about quarter of the season. But I think Seahawks are a legitimate contender, and we talked about that their division could be stacked from top to bottom and have a lot of solid teams. So they might not end up with as good a record as some other teams in the NFC, but I think the Seahawks have, if they can keep up kind of this pace, and I know Russell Wilson's touchdown pace will drop off, but if they can keep up this kind of offensive style they're going with, I think they could be a team from the NFC West to make some noise. Did you notice anything else in Week 3 out of either the NFC or the AFC?
And what you talked about, I mean, you covered the Falcons giving up I think it was 16-point lead to Chicago in the fourth quarter, and then they had to blow up the 15-point lead against Dallas last week. And yeah, I don't understand what's going on in Atlanta. And I know, and kind of like I said about the Chiefs game, they kind of, once they were up by like 20 or 15 or whatever, they kind of were like, okay, let's get back into the running game. And I don't understand why teams are doing this. Why, like, I'm not okay. I get it. Run the ball out. Try to, run the clock, because you could, end up throwing a couple interceptions, and the next thing you know, the team's back in the game and you lose it. Well, what I'm noticing this year is teams that get up by big leads and try to run it out are shooting themselves in the foot. The other team's coming back and scoring and beating them. And it's kind of been that way around the league, not just the Falcons. The Falcons are just kind of the big one, because Falcons, they should be 2-1 right now. They should be 2-1, and they've blown both games. And so I think that's kind of why they've been, the biggest, I guess, name for what is going on. But I don't understand why they're getting out of what got them there. If they're up, they scored like 30-some points in 3 quarters, and then they don't do anything in the fourth. And it's like, well, then why'd you stop doing what got you there? Why did you go to just handing the ball up, up the middle, and just, what's the point? Why? I mean, it's the NFL, we if you don't want the score run up on you, then find a way to stop them. I don't have a problem with, in the fourth quarter with 8 minutes left, you're only up by 15, which, guess what? That's only 2 touchdowns and a 2-point conversion. Like, NFL teams can get 2 touchdowns in 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And so why are you not putting them the way where they're up by 31 points? You're up by 31 points in the fourth quarter, you're probably not blowing it. But I don't think 20 points or 18 points in the fourth quarter is that big of lead, especially in the NFL where quarterbacks throw for 400 yards, no problem now. And so, I don't know. I hate to see it, because I thought the Falcons were actually going to be good this year. But the Bears, surprising. Yeah, I mean, I didn't see them going 3-0. And the fact that they got rid of, I wouldn't say they got rid of Trubisky. They didn't, but they subbed him out. And they came back and won. But the fact that they subbed him out when they were already 2-0, and Trubisky's kind of helped them get to the 2-0. Mostly their defense has got them to 2-0, but he's been the quarterback that's gotten you 2 wins. To actually go away from him, it's pretty ballsy, but it ended up paying off. They came back and won, so they're 3-0. Still surprising. Don't think they're really a 3-0 team. A team that is 3-0 that is definitely should be 3-0 is Seahawks. Russell Wilson's going nuts. I saw on Twitter earlier today, a Seahawks fan said that Russell Wilson threw, I think it was 14 touchdown passes in the season, the first 3 games. And 2 years ago, I believe, Patrick Mahomes did the same thing, and everyone was like, oh, this guy's so good. And now Russell Wilson does it, and people are like, oh, they don't really say anything about it. And my reply to him was just that Patrick Mahomes is the kind of the face of the NFL now. So they're going to try to be pushing him and pumping him up and all these stats and all these crazy things he's doing. And Russell Wilson's kind of just taking the back seat, and that's just because Patrick Mahomes is supposed to be the face of the NFL. But if you are a football fan or watch or know anything about football, you know Russell Wilson is really good. You know he's a top 3, top 5 quarterback in the league. You know he is. He does it every year. So it's not like, I don't know. Most football fans know that Russell Wilson is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Just because people don't talk about it doesn't mean that he's not. But I think this year, I know a lot of people are pushing for his MVP and stuff already. And if he keeps at this pace, then yeah, he will have an MVP type season. The only problem with kind of what's going on is you look at Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, and they're still putting up crazy stats that are same as Russell Wilson, yet they are the faces of the NFL. They are the young ones doing it, so they're going to probably get more of an MVP push than Russell Wilson would. But if you know anything about football, if you watch football, you know Russell Wilson's been good for so many years. It's just kind of like the reason he's not pushed to be that MVP yet is because of the younger guys that the NFL wants to make a name of the NFL for.
Well, and just I think Mahomes and Lamar are just kind of flashier in their style of play compared to Russell Wilson. He's kind of just a pocket passer. I mean, he's elusive. He can get out of the pocket when he needs to, but he just kind of sits back there and picks defenses apart compared to Patrick Mahomes throwing no-look passes, Lamar kind of adding the running portion of his game to it. So he's doing it kind of an understated way. And like you said, if you've been paying attention to football at all past couple of years, you've known he's good and that the Seahawks kind of, I'm not going to say muzzle him, but just maybe not let him do this as much as he should, kind of pass all over and lead the team maybe as much as they should, but seem to be doing that this year. So interesting to watch the development there in Seattle. As far as this next week coming up, we're in week 4, like Trevor said earlier. Doesn't seem to be maybe as many big name showdowns as there was last week. Some games that I'm interested in, Chargers at Tampa Bay. Chargers have been up and down, and some people thought, I didn't think they'd be great when we did a kind of our preview podcast, but they've shown some talent here and there going against a Tampa Bay team who I think is starting to right the ship, it seems like. Kind of had that rough opening week, but are starting to turn the corner. I think they're at 2-1. I'm interested in the Minnesota and Houston game. I think these are two teams that I think they're both yet to win, but I think they have the potential to turn things around. So I'm going to be interested to see who's maybe on their way to turning it around after this game or who's still kind of starting to slide off a cliff there after that game. New England at Kansas City. Obviously, as Kansas City fans, we're going to be interested in that game every week, but I'm just interested to see, get a close-up look at Cam and what he's doing for the Patriots. I've seen highlights and everything, but get a little bit more kind of game footage and actually watch them there and see how talented a team they really are. I think New England's 2-1 at this point, but they haven't been blowing teams out or have a high-scoring offense, so it'll be a interesting game style-wise to watch. And then one game I think you mentioned earlier was Buffalo at the Raiders. Buffalo, some people had them having a pretty good season, so on that game by surprised. Most people aren't surprised they're 3-0. But Las Vegas is doing better than a lot of people thought and have that new stadium and came out with a solid win there in their first game there. So I'll be interested to see if Las Vegas is for real, if they're going to start kind of coming back to earth at this point, and if what happens when they play a quality team. Do you have any matchups I didn't talk about there that you're looking forward to?
Well, this week's kind of just like a blah week, kind of. You got a Thursday matchup between Denver and New York, which are two of the worst teams in the NFL. So that's a great way to start a football weekend. And then you got teams that kind of are just like, like the Colts in Chicago, which usually is a really good game, but I don't know. I have no idea what to expect out of that game. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a lot of black games. There's no, really cool, amazing, Seattle, they're playing Miami. They should blow them out easy. You got New Orleans at Detroit. They should blow out easy. Baltimore and Washington. Arizona, Carolina. There's just a lot of kind of blowout-y games that it's kind of like, meh. I'm not seeing a lot. The New England KC game, actually, and not just because it's KC, but New England's played a lot better than I thought they would, and I'm kind of interested to see how they play against a top-tier team like Kansas City. If if Cam kind of goes back to his old Cam self where he's trying to make all these plays and it's just not working. And so I'll be interested to see if kind of Belichick has kind of broke him of that, and if he, even when they're down by 2 touchdowns, if they can get back in games, or if it kind of goes back to the old Cam where he's just trying to throw up crap and he just gets further behind. The Buffalo and Las Vegas game I'm actually really excited to see too, because kind of what you said, Las Vegas has played a lot better than I think anybody expected him to. I think I read a stat that there's like four quarterbacks left that have not thrown an interception. It's Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Derek Carr. And I know when we talked about the Raiders early on in the season, we basically said, like, what's Derek Carr going to do? Is he going to finally have a good season, or is he just going to kind of just be Derek Carr and have an 8-8 season? And so far, he's done good. He's not thrown any interceptions. Josh Jacobs has played well in running back. I mean, their defense has played good enough to win. I'm just interested to see if Vegas can keep it going, if the Raiders can keep it going against a team like Buffalo. That I think this is a very, very even matchup, and I think after this game we'll kind of see if Buffalo's the real deal or if Derek Carr is finally the real deal. I think after this game it'll kind of really show those two things.
Looking forward to week 4. Didn't seem like there was many injuries last week, at least to big name guys. You had some role players here and there that got banged up. As far as people that could be returning or names that you all would recognize, Michael Thomas and George Kittle, when I checked earlier today, they're both still questionable, but they did both return to practice today, so that's encouraging. Tampa Bay, I just was surprised when I was going through the injury list to see this. Scotty Miller, who's kind of come out as one of their go-to receivers for Tom Brady, his new, I guess, like Wes Welker or Julian Edelman kind of guy. And then Chris Godwin are both Scotty Miller is questionable. Chris Godwin is doubtful for this week, so they could struggle against the Chargers without a couple of their weapons. We'll see how that goes. Then the last thing we'll hit on for NFL is kind of our fantasy recap. We've been doing this every week, talking about our fantasy matchups from last week and what do we have going on this next week. So how'd your fantasy week go last week?
Ooh, it was a nail biter. Honestly, going into it, I played Phil, and going into it, I think I was up by a ton of points, like 40-some points going into Monday Night Football, and Phil obviously had Patrick Mahomes, and he was projected to score 30 points, and he texted me, he said, hey, do you think Patrick Mahomes is going to have 50 points? And I said, yeah, I mean, I could see him doing it. I mean, I doubt it. I mean, 50 points is a lot to overcome, and he comes out and drops 47.75 points. So he almost came back and beat me. I ended up winning by like 2 points, basically, after Monday night. So I did get the win to improve to 2-1, but it was definitely a nail-biter. And I guess the reason I won that game is we talked about it earlier. I gotta be happy with the play of Russell Wilson. He's played good in every single game this year. He had 5 touchdown passes and a 2-point conversion, so he ended up with 43 points for me, which he's just been absolutely crazy this year. He's the number 1 quarterback, number 1 player in fantasy this year. And then Chris Godwin, you just talked about him. He played very, very well, got me a touchdown, and then he got injured, so hopefully won't miss him. But he scored me 17 points. Gallup had a good week with 25. He had 138 yards and a touchdown. Dalvin Cook doing his thing as normal. 181 yards for him, which is nuts, with a touchdown. And then Nick Chubb adding 2 touchdowns with 108 yards to help me. Mark Andrews, my tight end, didn't do very good in that Monday Night Football, but I had just enough to get the win. New Orleans defense got me negative 2.7 points, and coming into the season, they're supposed to be one of the best defenses. And week 1, they did that. They picked apart Tom Brady, and I was like, oh, man, I did a very good pick getting New Orleans. And then last week, they lost to the Raiders. They got me like 5 or 6 points. And then this week, I knew going in that Aaron Rodgers was probably going to pick them apart. I didn't think they would get negative points, but hopefully from now on out, I'll be okay. We got at Detroit, which I'm not really worried about. Detroit doesn't have like a really super high-powered offense. And then we got the Chargers, who we're kind of still waiting to see what the Chargers are actually doing. So feeling pretty good, 2-1 on the season. Pretty excited for the team so far, and I think Russell Wilson's going to carry me to the promised lands.
Last week was rough for me. I guess the story boils down to I scored 162 points, which would have beat every other team in the league, but the person I played got 195 points, so that's kind of how that went. I really couldn't have made any more moves that for people that are already on my roster that would have made it any better. I had, Josh Allen went above his projected total, got 38 points, so that was great. Tyreek Hill went above his projected total, got me 21 points. Where I really struggled last week was tight end. I had George Kittle, who obviously didn't play last week. Darren Waller, who I don't think was even out. They weren't even sure he was going to play until day of or the day before, and he only picked up 2.9 points. I had him on the bench. I had picked up Dallas Goedert of the Eagles. He went in and had one catch and then got hurt, so didn't get much of my tight end position last week, but really couldn't have done much to get any more points, so it's kind of one of those things they have to roll with the punches. Something that did surprise me was I picked up Indianapolis's defense, and they were facing the Jets, so that's kind of all you need to say, but they got me 26 points, scored a touchdown, I think, or no, scored 2 touchdowns, 2 sacks, 3 interceptions, so that's one thing I've heard from some other fantasy football podcasts is that you might just want to pick up whoever's playing the Jets, pick up their defense going forward. This next week, I kind of have a dilemma at quarterback. Josh Allen's been great for me all year. He's been starting for me all year, but he's going up against a Las Vegas defense that's been decent. And then Aaron Rodgers is my backup, and he's going up against Atlanta, who's, as we said before, been giving up a lot of points. So they're pretty close numbers-wise, and I'm kind of still going back and forth on who I want to put there. Tight end should be a lot better for me this week. Waller's back healthy. George Kittle, I have him on the bench for now just because I don't know what to expect, but I got both my solid options back there. That's about it for me, I guess, as far as fantasy looking forward to this week. But I think you and I and about 2 other teams are all tied at 2-1. The guy I played, Derek, this week, he's leading our league at 3-0. He's the only undefeated team. But then we have 4 people tied at 2-1, 1 person at 1-2, and then 2 teams at 0-3. So both of us are towards the top of our league, and I think you're outscoring me by about 6 points, looks like, as far as points scored this season. So be interesting to watch and see how things develop from here.
Yeah, and so, again, if you haven't done fantasy football, I mean, if you're doing it with friends or just random people, it's just really fun because it really gets you excited for your matchups, your games, and you cheer for just more than your team. You cheer for, oh, man, I really need this guy to play well on Monday night because I'm down by 14. I really need him to score a touchdown. And so you cheer for him the whole game. And then, most of the time he doesn't get you that touchdown and you lose. But sometimes you get the touchdown and you win, and it just adds so much more to kind of the whole game of football in general.
And I think that'll about wrap it up for us. Thank you to everybody who's been listening through these first, I think we're at episode 13, through these first about 12, 13 episodes. We appreciate you guys, and if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether you're listening on Apple, Spotify. We also have a YouTube channel where we post the recordings of our podcast, and my fault last week on the audio. That's why we didn't get it posted. Something on my computer was messing up, and it kept lagging on the audio, but we'll be uploading it on about basically every podcast platform that people have, as well as, like I said, YouTube. You can just search Slacker Sports Show there, and then you can also follow us on Twitter to get updates on us, different sports stories you find interesting, different things going on in the sports world by searching at Slacker Sports.